Hi, my name is Phil Schraeder. I'm the CEO of GumGum, and I'm excited to be here with Pat O'Toole, who's the CMO of Burger King for US and Canada. So welcome to the chat.
Great to be here, Phil.
How has CES been for you?
It's been good. I'm still I'm at about 24 hours in. It's been a whirlwind, but it's just such an important conference for being in this industry and where it's going. And I'm so excited to have my team out. And it's not something that Burger King did in the past. And so now we've got this need to be digitally forward because of how consumer behavior is changing, how the marketing landscape's changing. And so it's such an important show, having a great time and looking forward to the next 24 hours before I go home being just as impactful.
Yeah, I feel like it's been great. It's just the complexities and things are moving so lightning fast. It's kind of this combination of staying in tune with what you need to be focused on to be present to meet your ultimate consumer where they need to be, but also like how does that influence your strategies overall. So what I found so incredible interesting as we were talking even earlier, it's the success of your Reclaim the Flame and that whole kind of initiative coming out of last year. I'd love to talk a little bit about like what really was the driving force behind that, and then as a part two to that, how did you think about that across just the different channels that now, as your consumers are all over the place, you can meet them there?
So I'll kind of talk about the impetus for it, and then what the details are, and then to answer your question on where it is and where it's going. So Burger King, coming out of the pandemic, did not recover to the level that our competition did. And so we saw the same dip everybody else did, but competition was recovering faster. And so Burger King was losing market share within QSR and actually lost its position as the number 2 burger chain that it held for years.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so Wendy's passed Burger King. And it was a big moment for the brand to say, hey, we've got to do something to turn it around. And in this space, which is very different from my old space at PepsiCo, but we are funded by a percentage of top line sales. And so our budget is completely tied to the sales that we generate. So you sell more, you get more, but you sell less, you get less. Right. And you can get yourself into a vicious cycle, which there was fear that was gonna happen on Burger King. We couldn't market our way out of it because we had less firepower every year.
Right.
So that's what sparked Reclaim the Flame. And so Reclaim the Flame was an investment from our parent company, Restaurant Brands International, into marketing and operations. So there were 2 big areas that we needed to address to get back on track as a brand and start growing share, start regaining share. And so the marketing side of it was an additional investment every year in our ad fund. But what came with it was making sure we have the right talent, the right agency partners, and really the right campaign to win. And so the team went back and looked at, hey, who do we want to grow with? How do we grow? And how are we going to win? And that changed the entire strategy that we've had. And that's kind of what we've seen in New Rule come out. So when people hear the jingle with the New Rule tagline like that, that was all part of this regrounding effort that started in Q4 of 2022. And then we started with the additional media firepower in 23, and we're going to carry it forward for a period of time into the future. And when we looked at that, we had actually started to have our media way too proliferated. So we were actually starting to poke and prod in new areas that weren't as effective, and we weren't measuring it to the levels that we needed to understand, hey, how do we get the biggest return for every dollar that we're putting in? And we actually took a step backwards, right? And so we did a lot in linear TV, right? Everybody else was going away, and we went back. But the reason we did is because we went too far, right? And that's in this new environment, which we can talk about a bit, is
so interesting.
Is you can dive in too deep, and I think we were maybe a little bit too deep, and so we went back to linear and said, okay, we've regrounded, and now let's see where the consumer's going and how we can be the most effective with every dollar. And so that's where we are in our journey. The great news is, if you look at how we've been reporting out, we're a publicly traded company, and Burger King US is always the focus of our investor conversations. Is the brand starting to get back on track. We're starting to outperform the QSR category, and our momentum's continuing. I can't really talk in detail, but our momentum's continuing, and we feel really good about where we're going.
That's awesome. And just to play off what you said, I think it's so interesting, especially at this time, for so many brands, because there's so many things happening. It sounds like, which I love, is you kind of went back to what you knew had worked in the past and said, we need to solidify the foundation of how we can have connected and make sure we don't lose sight of the value that has.
Yep.
Through, going back to like that linear TV experience.
Yep.
Become back experts at that, and then from there, where and how does the journey, right?
Yep.
I think many brands are trying to figure that out, themselves. Like, so kind of how, do you have advice or thoughts on like, what they should be in store for, if they're thinking about taking that leap to go back? Because it's a risk, right?
Yeah.
To say, we're going to go against the grain here.
It is.
Right? Like, so what did you kind of maybe just have to deal with in that? And I'd be curious because, it's hard. And for a publicly traded company, held to specific, street expectations, a different level of anxiety associated with that, I'm sure.
It is. And, it took a lot of maturity. It took a lot of discipline. And it took a lot of rigor to look and say, hey, let's take a step back and see where did we potentially go off course and how do we get back on course. And so when the team dug into it, there was the media strategy, but there was also the messaging, right? The messaging wasn't resonating with the consumers we needed it to resonate with to win. And so we had a twofold problem that the team went back and said, you know what, like, what are we? And everybody that you talk to about Burger King, the first thing they're going to talk about is Whopper.
Yeah.
Then they're going to say either flame grilling or flame broiling. We call it flame grilling now. We call it flame broiling when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And have it your way, right? Like, those are the three things. And we did some great, amazing breakthrough creative, but what we didn't realize is maybe we weren't taking consumers on the journey with us. So in my generation, that's what you knew of Burger King. And you knew the burgers tasted better because of those reasons.
Yes.
And so the team looked at it and said, okay, let's get back to the core of who we are. Because Gen Zs didn't know who we were. Mm-hmm. Gen Alphas, no clue.
Yeah.
And man, Gen Zs are the next generation of parents,
yes.
right? And they are going to be the next generation of wealth in this world. And so if we're not relevant with them, like, it is existential. And so that's what led us to, hey, let's take a step back, but not permanently.
Right.
Like, we need to stay with the trends, but like, let's just reground, get back to our core and our base, and then from there, not start the journey over, but it's a reset. And that's kind of, we talk about it being, we call it internally the royal reset, but it was just a reset of our business. And we're going to take that, and now we've got a strong foundation reestablished, and it puts us in a great position to go build off of it in the future.
That's awesome. I'm literally obsessed with what you just said earlier around the reframing of the messaging.
Yeah.
Because, I think as an industry, we look at channels, and then we look at the hot new channel, and then we all think we need to go.
Yeah.
And even going back to linear, even you're focusing on linear, but how you show up in linear sounds like you took a thoughtful approach.
Yeah.
To making that successful again, versus we didn't just go back to linear and go back and just do what we did on linear.
Yeah.
We went back and said linear has a whole new opportunity for us if we're paying attention to how it has an impact thoughtfully with the creative and the messaging today. I don't.
Absolutely.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, and then how it translates into area, like, so. We were, and some of this is luck, right? So
right.
I'm not gonna say that this was this grand, brilliant strategy that we knew exactly what happened was going to happen. But when we did our jingle, right? So we went back. The jingle that we put on air in Q4 of 22 was a remake and a modernization of a jingle that ran in the 70s, right? And so when we talked to consumers about the brand, there was a music heritage and a jingle heritage to the brand. And we remade it, and then we took it and we gave it a timely articulation of from have it your way to have it your way you rule. Like, when you come to Burger King, you can expect to get things how you want it. And in a crazy world with everything going on, like it's a great place to go do that, or a great place to bring your family, to get out of traffic, to get out of, running the kids around, to get a break together and just feel like, hey, this is my moment.
Right.
And so this was the timely articulation of that. But we did it and we put it across every platform, and audio forward platforms too, in addition to linear. And we invested in live sports, right? And we know that live sports is the non-skippable. So we paid a pretty penny for it. But what that did is it then turned into people remixing it on TikTok, right? It was so catchy that it got remixed, and it was one of the top 5 trends on TikTok at this point last year, right? And like we were looking at it and we're like, what is happening?
Congrats, by the way. That's a big deal. Like that is like what every brand wants.
Yeah. And it happened. And you can try to be intentional about it, and it doesn't happen. Right.
But what I love is that it sounded like you were intentional by going back to your roots and saying, this is what worked, and we can revitalize that in a way that then just adds the element of today, because the themes of what worked around the association of the marketing messaging and the advertising to what your brand offered is still the through line, right?
Completely. It is. And so now, and I go talk to friends and family, or just people I meet, and they're like, man, my 11-year-old just sings the song all the time, and like they're asking for a Whopper.
It's cool.
And it's like, wow, like we did it in 3 months. We went from not on their radar to, Mom, can we go get a Whopper? We went from not winning with families and not winning with Gen Z to like, and we're not winning yet. Like we've got a long way to go in the journey, but now we've got like, hey, I know this brand. So awareness, way up. Now it's relevance, right? So how do we make it relevant and convert, bring them in, bring them back? And my journey on Burger King, like as a consumer, started when I was 6 years old. And my brother loved it. I begrudgingly went there. Eventually had an amazing experience there where I won a sweepstakes as a kid. And then all in for the rest of my life. And like they'll always be in the consideration set.
Yes.
And there were brands out there, or competitive brands, that either weren't in my area or I had a bad experience with because my local one was terrible, still to this day not in my consideration set. Right. And so we have to win consumers in formative moments in their life. And it could be family moments, it could be college, but it's just so important. And so we've now done that, and now the trick is relevance and continuing that. Because once they're in and they have great experiences, they're going to forgive you, right? It's going to be hard to lose them. Over time, unless you really go off script. And the great news is with the way the brand's heading, I don't think we're going to be going off script anytime soon.
Well, and I would just echo in the way you're presenting this makes so much sense, because I love that you just said awareness, because when we just current state, CES 2024, it's a lot of talk here. Efficiency.
Yes.
And I get it. There are cookies going away. Like we're, GumGum, we're focused on mindset. We want awareness. We want to encourage people to like get to the foundation of awareness so that you earn the right to provide relevancy and capture moments.
Yes.
And it sounds like that's what you all have been doing. And it sounds like it's really working. Is that really kind of how you see it? It's like, instead of just going for like, we need this right now, it's we need to put in the work a little bit, in building the awareness, making sure we're staying true to our voice. And, is that kind of how you're thinking about it even as you head into this year? Of course you need an ROI and you want to balance but you foundationally, that connection and that ability for the brand to stand the test of time and be there sounds like, you're putting the right equation in place.
It is, and it's thoughtful, and there's something that we used to say at PepsiCo. So I spent 15 years with PepsiCo, and I worked on a lot of our different brands at different phases of their journeys. And it's such an honor to come in as a marketer to these iconic brands that have been around for decades, and it's like I get this chapter in its journey, right? But it's not. I'm not the owner of the brand. I didn't create it. I didn't make the brand, this or that. It's like we get this chapter. And so the team comes in. But what PepsiCo was great at on brands that were in turnaround is they say perform while you transform. Like you have to know who you're winning with now, and you have to keep them, and you have to keep them engaged, and then you have to go and say, okay, how am I going to age down the brand, appeal to a different demographic, appeal to a changing macro trend, but also not lose sight of what got you there.
Right.
And so the team did a great job of, and that's why the strategy was so brilliant of going to like, here are the three things that differentiate us, right? Whopper, flame grilling, have it your way. Staying core to that. That's going to resonate with who comes in today, but then bringing that message in a relevant way to new consumers, and then having that right balance, because I use the term, we don't want to do a student body left, which is for the non-football fans out there, like you don't want to run the entire team one way.
Right.
It's counter to how you've been running, right? Because then you mess up everybody else who loved you before. Then you're going to realize like these guys don't love us as much yet as we need them to grow our business. These guys now don't like us as much, and then you start swinging back right to a student body right. And so we've done a really thoughtful job of how do you perform and then bring in the new guests. And so you're not going to see us pivot way into this new area or take so much of our budget and go after who we're trying to acquire. We're just trying to strike that right balance and be thoughtful on how we shift it.
And I think you're saying, and I'll play it back, is because that wouldn't be authentic.
No.
Right? Because at the end of the day, like, and you're talking to someone who loves Burger King.
Thank you.
I remember putting the crown, birthday parties.
Yep.
Right? I would say that's the fourth differentiator for you. The crown.
You're right. No,
I just
it
think
is.
silly,
No,
but like
you're
that
right.
experience of just, and then how, yes, I'm older, I'm an adult, but if we think about it from like a strategy perspective, what is me at my age and me putting on that crown feel like today, and how is that message then capturing that? And then all of the new kind of emerging Gen Zers as well, at the core of that, it sounds like you're really staying true to, which I applaud, and I think it's the right way we all should be thinking about it as a brand, and it's nice to see the success.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the crown, because you look at what McDonald's has been doing.
Yeah.
With nostalgia, right? And those assets that they hammered into us as kids, right? Like Grimace and Ronald McDonald, and bringing back characters that they're nostalgic for people. And Burger King, while they did have a more family child strategy at points in its evolution, it wasn't near what McDonald's did. And so the crown is our nostalgic element. And so we've been pushing ever since I came in of like, we're going to have a more evolved crown strategy of how we rotate them and how we bring just these elements to them. So that's coming. But I would talk to our operators and say, look, you need to hand out a crown to everyone. And they're like, I'm not handing out a crown through the drive-through to a 300-pound construction worker driving a pickup truck. And I was like, why? I'm like, he wants to feel good. He wants to feel special. And they're like, it's embarrassing. We're not doing it. And I said, put me in a restaurant. So I went to Columbus, Ohio, stood in a restaurant, drive-through window. And I will tell you, I felt confident going into it, but that first truck driver that pulled up, wearing a tank top, I'm like, how you doing today? How's your day going? So would you like a crown? And he's like, I would like a crown, right? Puts it on, big smile on his face, and friendliness is such a big challenge in QSR, right? And Chick-fil-A does an amazing job in how they recruit and how they train for it, but we struggle with friendliness, as did a lot of our competition. But I'm like, this is your ticket to being friendly. You're offering something to make them feel good. And you know what? 80% of people took the crowns. And every single 300-pound construction worker took the crown. There were some families that didn't, which was kind of funny. But 80% took the crown. But 100% of the people smiled when I offered them.
Yes.
When they turned it down, they're like, I don't want a crown, man. That's silly. Nobody was mad. Nobody was angry. And it's like, you know what? We made that connection. And the people maybe wore the crown and when they got back to work or the job site and they had a laugh. Or maybe they saw it sitting there on their way home like, you know what? Like today wasn't all bad. So I think I love the crowns to be a big part of our strategy. It's a big differentiator for us.
And I love it because you're also, what I think is so important, it's like, look beyond the stereotypes we just inherently have, and the intention you have is just kindness.
Yeah, it's exactly what it is.
Making someone feel good. And you also, the way I see it is I'm thinking about, like, as someone, you telling the story, I'm like, okay, I pull in the drive-thru and you offered me the crown. Whether I said I wanted to take it or took it, maybe I want to bring it home to my child.
Exactly.
Hey, this is funny. This is how I felt when I was like, there is a whole element of the nostalgia and what could be used for that crown.
You're
a story. They
right.
could go back and be like, oh my God, honey, you'll never believe this. I was offered a crown. I haven't been offered that since I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And it's a conversation about the brand.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting, but also I'm excited to watch what you do with that, because I think it's going to be really cool.
Yeah, we think it could be a trip driver, and you nailed it. What I told the staff in the Columbus restaurant, I said, look, we have no idea where they're going after this. We have no idea who they're going home to. We don't know if he's got a special needs child.
Yes.
Like, you have no idea, but you're making his day better, and so. It's great, and that is a big part of our strategy. So I'm glad you hit on it, because I forgot it, and it's such a special differentiator on something we can do that's going to help make this brand loved again. Like, I still love this brand, never lost it, but there's a generation who we need to get to fall in love with the brand, and I think the crown is going to be a great way.
I can feel your passion, Pat, and I love that, because that's also going to translate into how this is. And
I hope so.
Of course.
I hope so.
So this was really an awesome conversation. Really appreciate it.
I enjoyed it.
Have an absolutely wonderful CES.
Thank you.
And
you too.
Look forward to watching all the continued success. And I can't wait to maybe run into you as I'm driving through a Burger King, or someone handing me a crown when I'm getting my next Whopper.
Love it.
So thank you so much.
If you get a crown, that means my team's message is
there you go. So the next time I'll send you an email.
Love it. Thanks,
Thank you.